introduction. Some of you, in fact, sitting in this video have known Debbie for way, way longer than I have. In fact, Jenny is here. And Jenny and Debbie went to college together. Oh, if you can believe it. But I wanted to share just a personal note. I first met Debbie, and Debbie was my boss. Yes, you did not know that. I became a student at the Pacific School of Religion, and Debbie was the director of PANA, Pacific Asian North American Institute at PSR. And so I worked under her for about a year, but then we became students together because we took a class together. And then we actually, after we both graduated, became a part of a spiritual direction group together with one other person. And so Debbie has been a very close friend of mine, somebody dear to my heart. But what I know about Debbie is that she's always been a pastor of the square, of the street, of the world. We follow, in some ways, the tradition of John Wesley, who said, "The world is my parish," right? But actually, we United Methodists have become, really, this building is my parish, and we've left that legacy behind. But Debbie continues to live that out, even though she doesn't come from the tradition of United Methodists. So, you know, by looking at this, what she does in the world more officially. I just wanted to say a word that the Interfaith Movement for Human Integrity is a new name of an organization that she's continued to work with, but she actually is the director, continues to be the director of the Interfaith Coalition for Immigrant Rights, which some of you have attended things and we've been invited to participate in. So really, today's invitation came from Becky as I was coming back, because the missions ministry team is interested in just understanding more of the work that Debbie takes part in and having us consider how we might be called into partnering with that work. So I invite you to hear from all angles, both the Spirit speaking, Debbie speaking, and our hearts speaking together. Welcome.
Thank you. It's really nice.
I demand that you clap for me next time.
It's really nice to be here, and thank you, Becky, for inviting me to kind of, I feel like I haven't been here in maybe a year or so a chance to kind of catch you up on some of the work in our ministry. First of all, I'd like to just ask if any of you did hear any phrase in the reading of the text, anything that stood out to you in particular. A new person. Two groups are made into a new person. Did anyone else? I know it was a very long passage, but did anyone else hear anything in particular that stood out for you? Well, what? Belonging, right? Sense of belonging in the household of God. One of the phrases that jumped out to me, of course, is why I put it in my title, is no longer strangers and aliens. Because it's a profound, it's a naming of the experience of being alienated, of being other. And this was once a feeling I thought only I had, but maybe it's because of growing up in Ohio from an immigrant family, feeling very alienated, looking different, having parents who spoke a different language, eating different kinds of food. I remember like a friend from school coming over and my mom was defrosting this giant squid in the sink. And she was like, what was that? So there, I felt very weird actually, growing up. I recently came across this Beatitudes called Blessed Are the Weird People. I'd like to read that to you. Blessed are the weird people, the poets and misfits, the artists, the writers and music makers, the dreamers and the outsiders, for they force us to see the world differently. And I began to wonder, actually, probably this wasn't my own experience. I probably wasn't the only person in the world who felt other or alienated. And I began to wonder actually how universal this experience is. Like maybe even the people we think of as normal, possibly, they may not feel so normal either. So I want to just do a little experiment here and just ask you to turn to someone in the pew and share briefly, have you ever had the experience of feeling stranger or alien or other? And why was that? So this is going to be really quick, just like a minute or two. Have you ever had that experience of feeling alien or stranger? Does everyone have a partner? So maybe take another 30 seconds. So you can thank your partner. Would anybody be willing to share, just very briefly? There was something that you heard or something that you shared? What was that?
Moving to a new school and then moving from one station to another as a soldier.
So being new and moving to a new place, a new situation.
And not speaking the language.
Not speaking the language. Not speaking language. What other factors contribute to feeling other or alien or strange? Not knowing anyone. Being the only Asian. Being the only one. Being afraid, yeah, to speak to new people. Yes. Yes, not knowing what to expect and having the wrong expectations. Yeah. So I think this is one of the human, was there anyone who never felt that? No. Okay, no, okay, that was my experiment, okay. That it is a profoundly human experience, and it's also deeply painful. And so the question kind of is what do we do about it? What do we do with it? What does it provoke in us? I know for me, it has provoked, experience of growing up in Ohio really provoked a sense of identifying with other people who might also feel on the margins. That it's, I became, I always root for the underdog in any sporting event, for example, So that's one of the things it has done for me. So here, that's the question, is what do you do with it? Once you have experienced that, what do you do with that experience? So the text today is a valuable reminder for us that the experience of otherness, of hostility, disunity, divisions, that even that can happen among Christians. Even that can even happen within our own church, within a place that's supposed to be safe, within a place that we're told is supposed to welcome everyone. And that's exactly what was happening in the context of this scripture, that there was an issue between the followers of Jesus who were of Jewish descent and those who were of Gentile descent. Even though it had already been settled that they were all supposed to be together and worship together and be a part of the same church, it was still a hot button issue. And it was still an issue of who had rank, who was more privileged, who was more authentic, who could speak for the group, who was the most righteous. Much like our churches today, we're still strained and splintered by serious issues and divisions. Afraid to talk about issues of race or issues of gay and lesbian inclusion, or in some churches, the issue of women's leadership. And sometimes there's even more internal issues, you know, like what kind of music are we going to sing in worship? Or how's the budget spent? Theologian Sally Brown, she points out that we could be missing something if we read the text as only a message to a congregation fighting over the color of the carpet. Okay? Because she says that the words of this text are actually meant to shake up empires. Not to shake up a church, but to shake up empires. And if we were in an ancient community, listening under the Roman Empire, hearing the reading of this letter, we would become very nervous. We would become anxious. We'd start looking at the door to make sure trouble wasn't about to walk in. Perhaps when we hear the text today, it seems very straightforward, or, you know, we've probably heard it before, so it's easy to domesticate it and to make it very personal. But we have to remember that salvation isn't just about the personal. It's important. Our personal relationship, how we get along with one another, is important. But salvation is also societal and systemic. We need to remember that Jesus wasn't just about saving souls, but he was about transforming society from the inside out. From the inside out means changing and challenging how we see things. Not just how we see the other person, but how do we see ourselves? Now, who exactly is estranged and alien from whom? It's about questioning the borders and the lines that we draw in our own hearts, the divisions and barriers we accept. We might even uphold silently in our daily lives. If we look at the recent issues kind of across the news cycle in our country this past week, we know as a nation we're still dealing with the issues of racism, of how some lives are valued more than others. I personally have been dealing with the reactions to the Pier 14 shooting in San Francisco, which is a very sad tragedy for the family of Catherine Steele, but also it's kicked up this huge anti-immigrant wave across the country. And so it just indicates that our society remains very, very divided. I want to share with you two stories today of two people that I've met in the past weeks that, for me, name a big division in our society that I think we're challenged to look at in a new way. We're challenged to see, how do we see ourselves as one reconciled body in Christ when we listen to these two stories. So the first story is the story of Charlie. I wish I had a picture of him, but I couldn't take a camera. Charlie has been living in San Quentin prison for the last 15 years. He's in his 30s. He's got like a shaved head. Charlie Vong. He came to this country as a refugee during the Vietnam War. And a group of us were invited to San Quentin, in particular, to meet Asian American and Pacific Islander inmates. Because they have a program there called Roots, Restoring Our True Selves. I forgot what the other O stands for, Restoring Our True Selves. And it's basically a program inside San Quentin where they get to learn about their own family history. They get to learn about who they are. They get to work on self-help stuff. They get to kind of question, what happened that I committed this crime? Well, the first thing I want to say was very emotional to go to San Quentin. I don't know if anyone has ever been to San Quentin. You have? Okay. There are several levels of security and checkpoints. The only thing you can bring as a visitor is your driver's license and a single car key. And when we went in, it was so emotional because they were like lined up. It was like 60 Asian American and Pacific Islander, young, most, by and large, younger than me, lined up on both sides. And we had name tags on. And so they were like shaking our hands like we were coming, like in a wedding or something. They were so happy to see us. They were so excited. They were like, thank you, Debbie, for coming. Thank you, thank you, Ed, for coming. And they're like, there was just like so much excitement. I was about to cry just going down the aisle. They were so excited to see us. And at the end of the line, Charlie, he happened to be at the end. I was just standing next to him. He goes, I feel like you guys are part of my family, and I haven't even met you before. But I feel like you're part of my family. He said, because you look like my family. The inmates grouped us off into small groups, and they facilitated a dialogue. And they started by going around and asking everyone to introduce ourselves. Those of them who were inmates all introduced themselves by the crime they were convicted of and how many years they have been incarcerated. There were Asian Pacific Islanders of all ethnicities: Chinese, Taiwanese, Vietnamese, Cambodian, Laotian, Hawaiian, Samoan, Tongan, Indian. Their convictions were murder, armed robbery, gun possession, murder. They'd spent 15 years, 19 years, 23 years. Most of them had committed these crimes when they were below the age of 21, young people. Some of them, like Charlie, even below 18, but tried as an adult. One thing that stood out to me is they talked about, several people said this, they basically shared their stories with us. Several people said, I never learned to read or write until I got to prison. They'd come to this country as children, they'd gone to school, and they'd never learned to read or write until they got to prison. They called it the immigration to prison pipeline. They said our parents didn't know how to parent us. You know, coming as refugees with so much trauma, here they were, like, you know, in this, you know, they're farmers, and here they are in this concrete jungle of Oakland or Fresno. They didn't know. We just wanted to belong. That word about belonging over and over came up. They said we wanted to belong. So we started hanging out with a gang who provided us a family. The young men that I met, like Charlie actually robbed a bank. He said, I'm different than some of the other guys. He goes, I actually went to college. I had a family. I had kids. But I couldn't provide for my family, and I thought, I'm the man. I should be able to provide for my family. And so I thought if I robbed the bank, no one would get hurt. He said, I didn't think about the experience of those inside the bank that day. So the men in San Quentin that I met, they were figuring out, how did I get here? What happened in my life? Why did I do that? What have I done? Kind of just coming to grips with the fact that they had caused their family so much pain. One man I met from Taiwan, he said, my parents don't even know I'm in jail. I've been here 20 years. They don't even know I'm here. I don't want to tell them because it would bring them so much shame. So he's never gotten a visit. He said they've come to grips to challenge themselves to think about the pain they've caused to another family, especially someone who may have lost a child because of their actions. They've come to understand history, the trauma. They said, I didn't know who I was, and I did stupid things to survive. Half the young men there raised their hands when we talked about immigration, because not only do they feel like their experience of immigration and not being, and still feeling so alienated as immigrants was part of how they ended up in jail, but they said that half of them have an ICE hold on them, which means that even after serving, say, 25 years in prison, they will now be deported. After completing their sentences mandatorily without discretion from a judge, because of the felony, they are subject to deportation, mandatory deportation, to a country that they've never been. The thing Charlie said was, the thing I want most from you is that I would like you to not see us as monsters. There's something going on in this country where people with felonies are considered other, beyond redemption somehow, monsters. I'd like you to see us as human beings, good people even, that made a bad mistake. What I saw when I left San Quentin that day was I saw people trying to be as human as possible. Trying to, waking up every day with 6,000 other people in a 5-tiered jail dormitory, or whatever you call it, cell. Still waking up and trying to figure out, how can I be compassionate? How can I still be a good person? How can I make today count? I tell you, I left that day wanting to be a better person. I said, I never could have gone around the room and introduced myself by the worst thing I ever did. I said, because I met them, I want to be a better person. I can't say that about every person I meet, unfortunately. But because I met them, I was like, that they're striving. You used that word, Ari, this morning. They're striving to be better, to be whole, made me want to be better. Will we be able to see them as part of the household of God? Will we recognize their humanity, see them as full members of our society? Currently, even if they weren't deported, they would never be able to vote. They wouldn't be able to qualify for affordable housing. Many of them wouldn't be able to get a job because they would have to check and say that they'd committed a felony. The second person I want to introduce you to is Delia. She lives actually here above the Pacific Renaissance thing in one of those apartments there. She's 25 years old. She's from Mexico. She speaks perfect English because she came to this country when she was 11 months old. And she said, if I had a superpower, that my superpower would be that I'd be able to fly to whatever country I wanted to. I'd be able to visit my relatives in Mexico. She said, because I'm undocumented, I can't leave this country. And I can't become a citizen. She only remembers ever speaking English. She goes, I came with my parents who moved here from Mexico because of the terrible crisis caused by the free trade agreement, NAFTA, with Mexico. And her mother was the youngest of all the kids in the family. So the grandmothers, the aunties and uncles were already here, but they were like the last ones to come. So they came. They came on a plane. They came with a tourist visa, but they overstayed their visa because it was so desperate to go home. She said, when I was 8 years old, I knew that my family was undocumented, and I was always afraid one day that my parents would not come home from work after school. I tried to reject my Mexicanness because it was a source of shame. I tried to be as American as possible. We hired a lawyer to adjust our status, but it turned out the lawyer was a fraud, and instead of having the relief of being able to stay, my parents were put into deportation proceedings. They've had to fight this deportation for over 10 years, spending tens of thousands of dollars. I got into Mills College. Mills College was a challenge because I cannot qualify for federal financial aid. I transferred to San Francisco State, and I made it through working with my mom cleaning houses while I went to college. And I now have DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, which means that I won't get deported. I can get a work permit, but I still will never be able to vote or become a citizen or a full member of this country. Delia hears this text. Delia is a Christian, and she said, I never knew there were so many scriptures in the Bible about immigrants. And I said, what do you think when you read this? She says, I hope that I'm no longer an alien someday. She said, I've had to spend every day of my life justifying myself. Justifying that I'm not a leech on this country or that I'm not a criminal. Can I be a citizen in the household of God? Will I have a place to call home? What is the call to us when we hear this text this morning? I played around with a thought about what is God's pathway to citizenship. As a country, our immigration reform efforts have been talking about, is there a pathway to citizenship? At one time, those of us who were Chinese or even Native Americans were not eligible for citizenship, right? You had to be born in this country. Some of you, I don't know if you've seen in the news this last week that the state of Texas is not allowing children who are born in this country, whose parents are undocumented, to register their birth. They're being sued. This is the first time in 150 years that kids who are not born in this country are now not allowed to get their birth certificate as naturally born citizens. So there are three subversive messages in this path. The first one is Christ is our peace. This is the part of the text that would have got us into trouble back in the day. Saying that true peace comes from Christ was and is a subversive message. Because in the Roman Empire, it was only the emperor who could give peace. It was the tools of the empire. It was war. It was conquest. That was what brought peace. But saying Christ is our peace is saying it's not war. It's not national security. It's not a wall between here and Mexico. It's not more deportations or more prisons that give us safety and peace, but peace comes through the subversive power of Christ, which is a boundary-crossing power. It disarms through giving of oneself, through suffering with, through identifying with someone else. Christ is our peace is saying, don't allow us to be divided and conquered, but we must come together because the empire that we are confronting has great strength. The second subversive message is this concept of citizenship in the household of God comes from grace. It's not Dahlia justifying herself. It's not Charlie saying, I did screw up, I robbed a bank, I created trauma for other people, but I'm a good person now. It's not about justifying ourselves, but it's about grace, freely given to us. It's not about meritocracy, or only those who get good grades, only those who are good in the terms of society. But it's about God's sense of God's child and children, born intrinsically with the dignity to be fully human. Today, the discussions around the pathway to citizenship, there are millions of people in California who actually could qualify to become citizens. They're green card holders, they're legal permanent residents, but they don't because it costs a lot of money to apply, to get a lawyer. They don't have English classes because all our English classes have been cut in the community college. They have very limited access. There are folks like Dahlia and her family, 11 million undocumented, for whom there is no path for them to become citizens. The best they can do is not get deported and work. Work and work and work, kind of like the Chinese coolies. You stay in the shadows, don't vote, don't argue for, your better wages, don't bring your family, don't really set down roots. The citizenship in the household of God is so different, isn't it? Freely given to us, and it forces us to rethink who is a citizen, who is a human. Our little tagline for our organization's new name is all people are sacred across all borders. The third step is that we're called to be reconciled as one body. And this can only happen when the barriers and the walls come down between us. One of the things that we've been involved in, I want to share with you, is in the East Bay Interfaith Immigration Coalition, which is a gathering of churches in the East Bay working on immigration issues, is like the title of that song. What is the song about building a house? We'll build a house. All are welcome. Last summer, tens of thousands of unaccompanied children came to the United States, mostly from Central America, but also Mexico. One of them, his name is Edwin. He's 16 years old. I met him in the pew of a church on High Street in Oakland. He had just come. Spanish is not his first language. He speaks an indigenous language in Guatemala, Mayan, Mayamam. He was like this. He felt like he didn't know anyone. He didn't speak the language. And all he could think about was the teacher. He's going to the ESL class at the church. And he said, the teachers in the ESL class, they're telling me I need to go to school, to the Oakland Unified School. He said, but if I go to school, I won't be able to work. He said, I have to work because I have to pay my debt, my migration debt, the debt I paid to the smuggler. And I have to send money home to my mom because that's the whole reason why I came. So we're working on two fronts, because it's not just Edwin. The Oakland Unified School District has 300 kids who came this last year, brand new, mostly indigenous, on their own. So 2 things. One is we want to build a house. We want to build a migrant house because there is no affordable place for them to live. There's no safe place. They can't get into some shelters because they don't have a social security number. So that's one thing. We have a task force looking to build a house, a refugee house. Probably not to build one. Right now it's just to rent one, but a place where these young men and women can stay. The second is we have formed accompaniment teams, we have 8 teams now, 8 congregations, 1 Jewish and the others are Christian, around Oakland, who have formed a team to be matched with 2 teenagers or a family that have recently arrived, to help them settle, to just walk with them, to go to court with them, to help them figure out the next roads in their path to get settled. I call these teams like my Uncle Alan. Probably you guys in your families had somebody like this. We had an Uncle Alan. He's like 90 years old in San Francisco. And everybody who migrated from my family, he taught them how to drive, right? He introduced them to his family association. He helped them find a job. He eventually helped them find, a place to live. He accompanied them, right? And helped them get their feet on the ground. So these accompanied teams are like being Uncle Alan to these folks who have no family. The other thing these accompanying teams are being, for me, I had an American grandmother growing up in Ohio. My grandparents lived in Asia, but I had an American grandma. Her name was Grandma Douglas. She was white and American, but we would go there for Christmas. She would have all these cookies. And I didn't have another grandma, but she was she was like a grandma. And so that's the other thing these accompanying teams are. It's like, how do we actually be family? How do we be family to some of the newest arrivals in our community? So this is something that maybe CCUMC, or I know Buena Vista is thinking about it, maybe in partnership or something, may think about being an accompaniment team. Last Saturday, we had the teams meet the teens. The teams met the teens and some young families, mothers like 22 years old with children who are here. They have an ankle monitoring bracelet on, because they're still in detention. But to meet with them, and one of the comments, we did a little appreciation at the end. One of the comments that the mother said was, "I'm grateful because today I met somebody who could make me laugh." And she said, in this 9 months I've been here, I've been able to laugh once. So it's an opportunity for us to come together as a new humanity, because hospitality goes both ways. It's not just us offering hospitality to others, but we and the offering become transformed. We become also part of this new creation. So the text reads in conclusion that Christ is the cornerstone, the foundation at the corner. The cornerstone is the first stone that you lay down in construction, a building. But it's even more than that. The cornerstone is the one that connects 2 walls. 2 walls that would be going in a different direction. 2 walls that could completely miss each other if it were not for a cornerstone that connects them, that allows them to meet, that actually allows a building to be built on top of them. It's a place of intersection and reconciliation. God desires and moves us towards unity and reconciliation amongst each other and with God. What cornerstone are we? What are we helping to bring together? What can we help to connect and to unite in the world and for God? For in the unity and the connection, we will be abundantly free.